In the first lesson, we learned what inversions are and how they can provide you with several different ways to play the same chord. This lesson will expand on what we learned and get you playing inversions right across the fretboard by visualizing inversion positions. Think of this part as a more practical way to apply the theory in part 1. The end result will be that you're no longer restricted to those same old open position and bar chord forms you learn as a beginner. In other words, this is about giving you more creative freedom with your chord playing. Starting with major triads, which we should know by now consist of the root, major third and fifth, we can play different combinations of these three notes in different positions on the neck. I'm going to start with E major as an example, with its root on the open E string. The most familiar root position of E major is the open chord form we all know as follows. Now, if we just focus on that low E bass string, we can form a 1-3-5 major arpeggio on that string as follows. Essentially what we have here is an E major arpeggio across the E string. These will become the bass notes for our first set of E major inversions. So the open E string was the bass in our root position E major chord. Moving to the next position, at the 4th fret, we have a major third bass note. On this major third bass, we can build our first inversion shape as follows. However, for easier fingering, players tend to cut this shape down to the following strings. Next, we move up to the 5th bass note at the 7th fret on the same bass string for our second inversion E major shapes. Finally, to the octave root position at the 12th fret. Once you have these chord shapes committed to memory, the next task is for you to be able to visualize their positions for any chord. We used E major in our example there, but here's how it would look for F sharp major, for example. See if you can spot any of the chord shapes we've just looked at. So exactly the same process applies. Build the chords arpeggio, 1-3-5 in this case, on the bass string, and then build the related inversion shapes on those positions. This is only for testing your knowledge. Once it's fully internalized, by seeing how the above forms are interrelated, you won't need to go through the entire process. We can also visualize inversion positions using other bass strings and open up even more of the fretboard for our chord playing. Let's look at major chord inversions on the A string now. Starting with the open A major form we should all be familiar with. That's our root position. Just like with the E string, let's build the major arpeggio on that bass A string. So, to the major third position, first inversion at the 4th fret. The 5th position, second inversion, 7th fret. And the octave root position at the 12th fret. This is the standard C-shaped bar chord you might recognise. And remember, you don't always have to play the full shape. For example, using the C-shaped bar chord, we could just play the top 3 strings of that shape. Okay, now let's move on to major chord inversions on the D string. So, starting with the open D major shape, we can build 3 more inversion shapes on D string bass positions. First inversion shape on the major third position at the 4th fret. Note that you don't need to include that high E string 5th, but it does fill out the chord a bit. second inversion on the 5th position, 7th fret, and finally the octave root position at the 12th fret. In all these examples, we've been playing a different chord for each string, E major, A major and D major. But to really test your knowledge of these inversion positions, we need to pick one chord and be confident with finding its inversions across all 3 bass strings. This will really help you dominate the fretboard with any chord thrown at you. This also opens the door to chord improvisation and can help with getting into position for a solo. The easiest way to do this is to first visualize these triad intervals in relation to their root notes on different strings. Starting with the low E string root, if we wanted to play inversions of C major, we'd find the root note of C in the 1 position and be able to see its relative 3rd and 5th bass positions for building the shapes we've looked at previously. Onto the A string root. Don't just look at the positions above the root, look at how they appear below it. For example, if you find the root of the chord on the A string, you could play a 5th position shape on the low E string directly beneath it. Onto the D string root. So, whatever chord you're playing, first find the root note for that chord, either on the E, A or D strings, and then visualize its related inversion shapes based on those positions. Let's use C major as an example and see how we would use our knowledge of these inversion positions to play the chord right across the fretboard. Test your knowledge of inversion positions by picking a root note and finding related chord shapes on the E, A and D strings. Next time we'll look at some of the ways we can use major and minor inversions in chord progressions. Cheers.